The Spire is a game where you play a dark elf that is fighting against an oppressive government of high elves. And it is such a good game, guys! It's so good, we made a one-shot game and put it on the channel. Click on the top right corner to see that video now. Alright, let's get into that review! 1. The simple yet expansive game system. The game mechanics in this game all push towards one thing: the creation of an interesting story with twists. The system is rather simple, so it's easy to get the hang of it. Each aspect of your character is deeply linked with the world of the Spire. Your classes reflect your position in the strange society of the Drow. You also get different skills based on your durance, a mandatory period of servitude for the high elves in charge. If you were in the military, you get fighting skills, but serving as a worker in the field or mines, you would be more resistant. There is no moral alignment system in this game, as you are encouraged to take a more nuanced approach to the way your character sees morality, and that is going to be important later on in the video. The entire game system revolves around stress and your ability to resist it. Every time you roll, there's a chance you will take stress. Blood stress, for example, happens in the form of wounds. Mind stress comes in the form of headaches or the inability to concentrate. Silver stress comes in the form of loss of resources. Shadow stress damages your cover identities and gets you police attention. And lastly, reputation stress makes you lose social standing. When a stress gets too high, the GM rolls to see if you get fallout, a roleplay element that arrives and complicates things for you, but relieves you of stress. This creates new problems for your character and requires new roles to fix, creating a forward momentum for your character to go from trouble to trouble in a unique roleplay experience. And that brings us to the experience system, which is also story-oriented, as your character gets minor advances when they enact minor change in the Spire, and major powers when they change the Spire in an irreversible way. This makes the player's motivation to interact with the world the primary focus of character progression, and this system really pushes the story in interesting ways: the paths of rebellion. 2. The intricate lore about rebellion. The Spire is all about rebelling against the oppressive High Elves, or, as they like to be called, the Aelfir. I really hope I pronounced this one right. They rule from the top of the city after having conquered the Drows' homeland as a colony long ago. Nowadays, the Aelfir lease the Spire to its own native population. The price for inhabiting your own city is 4 years of durance, and unpaid work for the High Elves. Your character's people are poor, and they have to resort to crime or servitude to survive while your religions are being forbidden in favor of the Aelfir's gods. They even cursed you long ago with magic so that all of your race would see their skin burn at the touch of sunlight. But there are those who resist. They are the Ministry of our Hidden Mistress. They are your characters who fight the system despite the risk of being killed or sold out by anyone who learns of your involvement with the Ministry. All of the lore points to a type of adventure rarely explored in role-playing games. Usually, adventurers in fantasy settings are travelers who help out wherever they pass and move on. The Spire's lore tries to focus on a single struggling city and explore the intricacies of the power struggle within it. This power struggle has some very interesting parallels with the real-life struggles of some people. The role-playing game, that is, the Spire, is important to the mindset of this day and age. In our world, more and more of us are seeing the society we live in being overtaken by oppression of minorities and racism. We see the time coming when we might have to fight back, and some of us are already doing so. The Spire explores what it is like to resist an unfair government, and it shows why difficult situations like poverty or racism might push one to break laws. In this sense, the Spire has built its gameplay around the idea of morally ambiguous characters who do morally ambiguous actions for ambiguous reasons. It doesn't point to a good guy or offer a single good way to rebel, and it embraces the idea of multiple ways of resisting. And all of this seems to be a criticism of the famous game Dungeons & Dragons. 3. The best response to Dungeons & Dragons racism. The Spire purposefully mirrors the types of oppression that people of color have had to face in our society. The lore doesn't reference a specific ethnicity, but it is clear that the theme of the game is racial oppression and resistance. And that is pretty nice. But the Spire is not the first game to make a connection between dark elves and people of color. In fact, it was Dungeons & Dragons that first introduced a series of species that seemed steeped in racial prejudice. You see, in D&D, the Drow are all evil, except for the one and only Drizzt Do'Urden. Drizzt Do'Urden? Drizzt Do'Urden. Drizzt Do'Urden? This guy, who has a series of novels about being the one good dark elf. Otherwise, the ebony-skinned elves are always portrayed as backstabbing, self-serving, evil enemies for the heroes to kill. Players are encouraged to assume that allied Drows will betray them the second they get the chance, and the culture of the Drows itself is portrayed as centered on the worship of an evil goddess, Lolth. Meanwhile, white-skinned high elves are a playable race of heroes who save the day pretty often. This is controversial, as it is a recurring motif in fiction to make evil characters dark-skinned. There are many examples of characters transforming into an evil version of themselves and suddenly having darker skin tone. It is the case in many video games, like Ken and Violent Ken, or Ryu and Evil Ryu in Street Fighter 2. And this is a factor that almost never happens the other way around. This is quite a problematic motif, as seeing it often in media can have an influence on the people who experience that media. There was a study done on children who were presented with white dolls and black dolls. And when asked to point towards the evil ones, the children tended to point towards the people of color, despite the fact that there is nothing intrinsically evil about skin color.
And which doll is the bad doll?
That is caused by the internalized racism that is prevalent in our society, and the presence of multiple dark races in D&D is part of that problem. There are the Dark Elves, of course, the most famous ones, who are mostly seen as having the evil alignment, but there are also the Dark Dwarves, the Duergar? Durgar. They are also the dark versions of dwarves, are darker skinned, and with an evil alignment. This seems to suggest that, to the creators of Dungeons & Dragons, there was a correlation between the two, and this is racist. You don't see many D&D species that are evil and a white-skinned version of a good species. Why is that? Because the creators of these species had internalized racism. And this is where the Spire comes in by completely rejecting the idea of moral alignment. Good and evil, chaotic and loyal, and neutral don't apply here. The Spire makes you play a character that has decided to take arms to help their people, but they have to break unjust laws and do dark deeds for the good of the Drows. These characters could never fit neatly into boxes of alignments, and so the Drows can't be seen as all evil. Instead, the game offers a story that explores why some characters and people are pushed to rebel against an oppressive system. Looking at the reasons behind the actions of our characters allows us to understand that our morality isn't defined by the color of your skin. By making the players the heroes of a story of resistance, the Spire offers a scaled-in response to the racism in Dungeons & Dragons, where they are often seen as foes. And on top of that, number 4, the Spire doesn't make any problematic parallels. The Spire has a very interesting approach, because we don't see very often stories about changing an oppressive system from the inside. The most popular stories that talk about racial oppression in modern media usually concentrate on how one can find their place inside the system. In Bright and Zootopia, for example, two movies that aimed to talk about racial oppression through their stories, the focus of the characters is to modify the system they live in by solving its issues, not overthrowing the system. Both of these movies also make the same mistake in the way they create parallels with the fight African Americans have to face in our society. Both of them give logical reasons for their oppressed group to be seen as more evil than the other members of society. In Zootopia, the predators are there to symbolize African Americans, but they are represented as having violent predatory instincts that used to push them to violence against others. This idea was developed by the Wisecrack channel in their video, which you can see by clicking on the top right corner of the video right now. In Bright, the orcs are the ones who serve as a metaphor for African Americans. But instead of having been the victims of oppression for no reason, the orcs have a history of being evil since they joined the Dark Lord of this setting and tried to take over the world. These clumsy parallels wrongly suggest that fear of minorities is warranted and that there is a good reason the system oppresses African Americans. In the real world, there is no such excuse for systematic oppression of minorities, and that is where the Spire shines. The game has a few parallels between the Drows and African Americans, but none of these parallels present the Dark Elves as having deserved their oppression, and that is a really important point for social justice. If you, as a game master, want to draw more parallels and make your game more political, please be careful not to make the same mistake as Zootopia and Bright. 5. Other awesome games from the same website. Rowan, Rook, and Deckard, the company behind Spire, have a few other games up their sleeve that are quite spectacular in their ability to be inclusive and fun. Here are a few games you can download for free from their website. Big Gay Orcs, Wizard Battle Hats, Dr. Magnet Hands, Thicker Than Water, Giant Goddamn Robots, and Hack the Planet.
Hack the planet!
Shut up and get in the car!
Hack the planet!
All of these games are as awesome as they sound. Go check them out. If you want to spread awareness and contribute to helping this channel, please share this video around you. Comment below the video what role-playing game you want me to cover next, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more content like this.